Alicia Davis with the In Their Own Words Veterans Museum and John Kirchhoff doing the filming. We're here with Don Singlestad, or Sylvester Don Singlestad. This is the second interview with Don. Don is the most decorated non-commissioned officer in the United States, I believe. It is quite an honor. Quite an honor. And last interview, Don shared with us several of his medals, just absolutely fantastic. What a story. And our last interview, we couldn't get all the information, and we had some gaps that I wanted to ask some more questions about. And we're going to focus on 3 areas, and then Don might add some other stuff. The areas are his North Africa campaign, his efforts with the underground in Italy and the capture of Mussolini, and the third one, or third ones maybe, is Don said he had some funny stories to share with us. And so we'll go there too and then see where this takes us. So Don, let's start by kind of filling in the gap on your North Africa campaign, and can you maybe just start with when you first went over there?
Well, when I first went over, I had, of course, taken my training, which I told you before, with the British Commandos. And then I was one of the first instructors of the American Rangers. And then just before we jumped off for Africa, for the first invasion by the United States, from Ireland and England, or Ireland and that area over there, they sent out a warning that you couldn't be married in the Rangers. And I was married because I was 23 years old. I was like a grandpa of these 16 and 17 and 18-year-olds. And when we got to Italy, it was very, or Africa, it was very interesting because when we went over, I run into a guy on a boat, and I can mention his name, I've got permission, Abadili. And he was an Arab, and he spoke some Arab. So he got a hold of a sheet. Now, I don't know if I ever gave you a sheet of that. I've got one someplace. And so he and I on the boat were practicing Arabic words. So when we got to Italy, we got to Africa, pardon me, I started thinking, you know, it'd be fun to go out, Abe, and talk. I called him Abe. Let's talk to some of these Arabs and see if we can get communication with them, because I understand from talking to some of the English people and all that they have no time for the Germans and they have no time for the French. And the French now had joined us. I was a prisoner of the French, of course, for 4 years, or 4 or 5 days. Mm-hmm. Well, by doing that, I started getting involved with working with the Arabs some too. And I had quite a few experiences with them. And so he and I went out, and then one day we got a new officer, and I said, Abe, I got a new lieutenant in my outfit. He seems like a pretty nice guy, so I'm going to tell him we're going to go out and like this and see if we can catch some Arabs and learn a little. So I said, maybe he won't let me go. But I said, you're from another unit. You're here as a medical man. He said, well, why don't you go ask him? I said, come on along. So he came along, and I introduced him to Abe. His name was Eldon Lance. And he was in law school when he got drafted into the service. And so I told him what we were going to do, go out and contact some Arabs at night in no man's land and practice our Arabic that I'd been working on. Looked at me a while and he said, you're not going without me. Well, from that day on, we became inseparable. He was a nice officer to get along with. He ended up, before the campaign was all over there, as our company commander. And so we went out and we contacted Arabs and stuff like that, and it was kind of interesting. And so that's how I got working with the Arabs. I didn't do it intentionally. I wasn't ordered to do it, but all through the war, he covered for me whenever I was going out and stuff like that. Oh, he had to go to the hospital for a checkup or something like that, and I'd do that. So, and so we got along like two peas in a pod. I'll tell you a little funny one here too. You know that my first mission, and I don't think I told you about that. My first mission in Africa, obviously, assistant squad leader or platoon leader. So the second in command, and he said, "You got to take a squad out tonight, you know, and protect the premises or the outlying stuff." So I said, "Okay." So I took the 10 men and myself, and got 5 on each side. One corporal was the one, 5 on one side, and the sergeant was the 5 on the other side. And I got all done, and I sat down in the middle. Found a nice big rock to sit against. Well, I did this, not thinking, pulled out a cigarette, put it in my mouth, took a lighter, lit it, and I got maybe one drag, and boom, something went flying by my head. Well, there was a sniper out there. So I got the hole here in my neck yet from the rock that they dug out.
Oh, wow.
So, but I never even got Purple Heart for it, because they wouldn't give us Purple Hearts, you know, if we didn't go to the hospital. And 90% of the time, Abe would patch me up. He said, "We can't let you go to the hospital. You got to stay here," because I became one of the top frontline sergeants and moving through, because I'd always go out and reconnoiter where we were going to crack them in the morning or crack them at night. I like to fight at night because they didn't see you coming. And the closer you get to them, the better off you are. Now, it was hard for me to tell my men this, but when you get close to the enemy, you only got small arms to watch out for, and their own mortars and their own machine guns. Where if you were back farther, the big stuff comes in, and that's what slaughters people. So the closer I could get my men to the front, to the enemy, and the better chance we had to fix bayonet and attack them.
Mm-hmm. And the safer you were.
Yeah, it just made sense. And so that was, we all laughed about this one here, but I quit smoking right there. Threw the lighter away too.
Not taking any chances.
No.
You were a target there with your light there.
Oh, sure, perfect target. Yeah. But so I knew the enemy was out there. You know, so they were doing the same thing we were, trying to figure out what the opposite line was doing.
So you learned Arabic?
What? Yes, I learned quite a bit of Arabic, and I got along with the Arabs very well, and I did rescue one of their, well, they had groups, and they'd get along these little areas where there's a little water hole, and of course, the more wives they had, the wealthiest they were. That's how they figure their wealth. Very interesting, and they had some beautiful women. And my first big experience with them back in the line was they came and got me into our lines, and I didn't even know they were there. They could sneak so easy. And they were what they call the headhunters. They carried long knives, and they would feel of your head at night. And if you didn't have an American helmet on it, your head would just disappear. Now, people don't realize what we went through with that people. And they did send a fighting group over to Italy. And I happened to get put in charge of them, but they took them back again because they were too dangerous. Because anybody that, you know, they could sneak up on. But I enjoyed it over there, getting with them. And we went out 5 mile one time back of the line at night. And you didn't hear a shot fired.
So tell me, I think this is curious. You seem to be really innovative compared to maybe a lot of military people, you know, who took orders and maybe didn't try anything new, but you were ready to do different things. For example, just learning the Arabic, going out and talking to the Arabs, all through your whole military career.
Yeah.
And you stepped outside the box, I guess that's what people would say. You did things differently. Why do you think that is? What was in you?
Well,
that
I
made you
think it
different?
was probably my nature, number one, and I think a lot of it was from when I was young. I was a noted hunter. I hunted with a rifle, 22, and there's nothing to shoot pheasants and ducks out of the air with a 22. I became a perfect shot right off the bat, and I still am. My left eyes are getting awful bad, but I can. But I taught my men not to shoot by an eye, shoot with both eyes. So I always did that, so my left eye is getting bad, and so my right eye is doing the focusing for me. But you can't get people to do that. They say, well, close your eye and aim. That's the worst thing you can do. I worked with the national rifle team, the team that just went over to China, the rifle team, and we got a girl from Wisconsin on that team. I worked with her for about 2-3 times this last year. And she had been told before to shoot with both eyes. And she's doing just terrific. She may come home with the gold this year.
Wonderful. So as far as, you know, kind of back to the question about it was in your nature to take a chance, maybe take a chance that...
Well, you have to do that. You know, I did it all my life. And what's the difference? Really...
You're a risk taker.
Yeah. When I went over there, I went by the Statue of Liberty. And I said, I'll see you in my dreams. I didn't figure I'd ever come back alive. But I said, I'm going to give them all I got until it happens. And I had some awful close calls.
So you were with well, you just alluded to the headhunters that were over there, and you had those in a team for a while?
Yeah.
Try to get those particular guys working with you for a while?
And then they are excellent at seeing at night. And I couldn't figure out why. So they gave me a lot of lessons by watching them. When they were going to go out at night, when it's nice and daylight, they covered their heads and went to sleep. They'd wake up when it was dark. And you try that yourself sometime. And you'll be amazed how you can see at night where you couldn't see it. You do it one night and do it the next night, so that the sky is the same way, you know, dark. And you can wake up. Now, here's another example. A lot of people get up and go to the bathroom at night. Do you turn the light on? It's the worst thing you can do. That exposes yourself. If you can get up and go to the bathroom without turning a light on, you'd be amazed how quick you can start seeing coming back.
Good point.
Yep. Different things you can try. And I've always been a kind to risk anything, try anything. You have to do that in this world.
And so, and like in the military, it seems like sometimes they frown on risk takers, and other times they're admired. You know, so how do you make that choice? You know, when you can't take a risk because you'd be endangering other people, or that it's time to take that risk on your own or whatever. And so I've thought about this interview with you for quite some time, and I've thought about how unique you were in that area, you know, because a lot of people would take orders and not do anything. But you took the initiative, you know. So.
Well, you see that when I gave an order, I was hoping they'd carry it out, and that happened 2 or 3 times. One of my guy that was lieutenant, just going to be promoted to captain, and I had feelings. And I could read people's eyes. This is the worst thing that people can do. I could tell you, when I went into battle, of the guys that were going to die. It's an awful hard thing. You try to look away from it, but your eyes won't let you. And even now, I lost a guy Sunday night. And I went over to see him with my little dog because she'd go down and sit with him. And I went home and I said, that's the last time I'll see him alive. And they called me in the morning and he was dead. So I got the funeral coming up Friday. But it's a thing that you can't get rid of. You try to, but you just can't. You surmise. And then you feel what's going to happen. You know something's going to happen.
So you had excellent intuition.
Oh, it's all the time, all the time. And it worked beautiful when I worked with Back of the Lines because I used it very, very strongly then. And my captain, Lance, had that way. And another thing, you never have to ask him or ask me where north was, or east was, or south was, or west was. We could point to it in any country, any place. You know, I probably had, if I had one man or two in a platoon, which is a pretty big group of men, 50 or more, you're lucky. You can't say you have to use their left or right. Some of them don't even remember which their left or right are, on your left or on your right. And you give them coordinates. Why, when it comes when we were shelling and stuff, that's why I was put fire direction chief with artillery unit towards the end of the war. They said, you call them better than the officers all the time. And then, of course, another thing, too, that was that, you know, they wanted to give me a field promotion. And I went in and I sat down to Captain Lance and I said, now what happens if I take this? He said, well, you'll be transferred to some other division or something, or you might have been sent out for some training first and brought back. And I said, I can't stay with my outfit, men I've trained? And he said, no. I said, they'd say I was forsaking them if I ever did that, because they trust me. My men fight for me. And it was too good a thing because I had the biggest kill, but I was always out in the front too. But I lost about, I would say, 40 men killed in World War II in my platoon. And I know I had over 300, 400 wounded. And
so this was all in North Africa?
Africa and Italy.
In Italy.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit more then about North Africa and some of the battles that you had.
Well, I went right straight through from the start to the finish. I think I elaborated on it when this one captain insisted I go out there and to protect their rear end so that they could go back 200 or 100 feet, well, 100, about 100 mile, 90 to 100 mile they moved back because the 34th, 168th Infantry lost their whole regiment. The whole regiment got captured at Hill 609, or in the Kasserine Pass, really, which led into Hill 609.
Yeah, and I remember you told us an excellent story about Kasserine Pass and the harrowing experience.
Yeah, and then that's when I had to have my men separate, each go single, trying to get out of there. Mm-hmm. It's the only way we could. You couldn't go, you know. And of course, that's where the Arabs came in. They found me. And I could speak enough to let them know who I was. And they started picking my men up and bringing them up to meet me, which was about, I'd say we went 100 miles, 120 to the peak of that mountain. We could always see it day or night because I knew they couldn't say if they were going west or going east. But in the daytime, they could tell by the sun and stuff, and then the moon, but very seldom you see a moon either. Yeah, so, but that was the hardest thing, was to teach people direction. A lot of my men got captured by going the wrong direction.
And so you were battling the Germans?
Yeah, yeah.
And who else was there?
We were only battling the Germans there.
Only the Germans there.
Yeah. And then, see, that was, I ran into a guy after I was here. He's blind now, but he was with the tank group that got knocked out. They were supposed to be come up and back us up. Mm-hmm. And they lost the whole works by the Italian. Yeah, Italians were there too, by the way, you know.
Because they were helping the Germans at that
Oh,
time.
yes, yeah, very much so. They're Italian, Mussolini's sons. I just sent a tape down to a guy in Minneapolis that I had. They set up the Air Force. Now, he had 3 or 4 sons, all legitimate. They were a pretty wild bunch. And it's a good story. And a guy mailed it to me, and he said, I said, as quick as I saw the first picture, I said, this is Mussolini's son. So I had to explain that all to him. That Mussolini was great and fat. He wasn't skinny and stuff like that. He was trying to copy Hitler. That was his idol. You could tell it by him, his uniform and everything.
So he had his 3 sons in Africa, North Africa then?
3 or 4,
oh.
But they started the Air Force. They were the generals in charge of the Air Force.
Okay.
And they were bombing us too over in Africa. See, it's just a hop, skip, and a jump from Italy to Africa.
Mm-hmm. So you were, how long were you in North Africa? You said for the entire time.
Well, from the day we invaded, I think we were there from 42 to end of 43. Mm-hmm. In between those. I have the dates, but I don't.
Okay.
I can't pop them right up like that.
So tell me about, there were all the fighting going on, but there must have been typical days when, maybe some typical days where things didn't happen, that was quiet.
Oh, yeah.
What would a day like that have been? I mean, what did you have for breakfast? I was trying to remember if I asked you that question, or what were the meals like,
Well, I don't know if I put this on tape, but I can tell it to you. It's kind of a laughable situation. we were sent out right off the start one time to attack just as flat as land, and here sits the Germans up in the hills in the mountain. Or not really a big mountain, but a high spot. And of course we started going up, and I knew that they were going to open up on us any time as quick as we got close enough for fire. And I had the lead platoon. So I had one squad out, which I was with, the front one. I never stayed back. I always stayed with the leading group so I could control them. And they opened up, and of course, we hit the ground. And I never knew I could dig through rock, but I almost did. And finally, I was pinned down, and I could hear this rat over the top of my head all the time. And I just hung in there. And then I'd hear one of my men scream. Well, you see, I knew then they'd gotten up and run, because you were in machine gun range and they had you all zeroed in. So pretty soon I heard some rumbling of tanks, and I said, don't tell me the Germans are going to come in tanks now and get us that way, run over us. Pretty soon this tank pulled right out in front of me, because I was about the fourth from the lead man, maybe my scout or two in that platoon or in that squad. And so pulls around us, was British. And the guy said, little hut out there here, son. Yeah, little hut. Just a minute, he says, I get those bugs. And he says, come on, I'll have us a pot of tea. It's the best tea I'd ever tasted. But he gave it to me in his cup. And I said, do this to some of those other guys. And he said, we will, but you go straight back now. So I headed straight back. Oh man, I was so glad. And I got picking my men up on the way and walking over some of them that panicked and jumped up. So when we get back, they said they were coming with a hot food. Well, I hadn't had hot food for about 3 weeks or 4 weeks now. Just sea rations or something like that. And you didn't only eat that, but you ate because you had to eat it. And I said, gosh, I'm going to get a good hot cup of coffee, and then I'll set it over here on this table or this fender so it cools, because they'd have their coffee boiling hot. And I pulled my pack off. My canteen was about this big around. My pack was all full of holes. And on my hip is where I carried my canteen, and that was a little tiny ball of stuff.
So you'd been shot several times, but all of these...
They'd been, and my back had laces across it, red marks all the way down. That's how close I was to getting it. And I said, oh, doggone, I have to go find somebody that's got a... I'll get the mess sergeant. Maybe he brought a canteen along. And the guy said, I'll exchange both of them for yours. Well, I should have kept them. But he gave me his bad ones. Of course, now he's a hero because he had this all shot off of him. And I got his canteen, his mess kit, and his silverware. And so I went through the line, filled it with hot coffee. Came back, says, oh, that coffee should be cool now. I was starving for a cup of coffee. Took a big swallow, and somebody switched cups with me. They got the cool one. And I ended up at the first aid station with my mouth and everything just all blistered up. So they took iodine and run rabs down. So I didn't get to eat even that night a good deal. But we always laughed about that. Lance got a big kick out of it too. He says, you'll learn better. He said, You know, you should say, this cup is mine.
So the campaigns or the fighting kept on in Africa, and what did you feel you were successful when you left, or they just moved you on to Italy, or?
Well, you know, I always tried to keep a smile on my face, even when we went into battle, when I talked to my men. It was amazing how your personal appearance to your men. He isn't afraid, so I won't be either. That's the idea. I had a guy that stopped me. He's from Florida, and he heard I was down there, and he came to look me up. And he said, "You remember me?" He said, "I was an ammunition carrier in your platoon." I said, "No, I don't." Well, he said, "I remember you, because right after I came in, we were going into battle, and you were going, no, you were first sergeant at that time. I was first sergeant for 7 months, and tried to run my platoon to the side. Well, I run my platoon, so the first sergeant didn't get nothing done. And I told Lance, I said, he said, I've had 3 of them up here down. They quick as they get into this heavy battling, they take off. We couldn't get replacements, hardly at all. We were always short of troops. And so he said, I don't know, but he said, well, I don't want that first sergeantship. I didn't want it when you threw me in there. I said, my men are complaining. They don't like the new sergeant we have out there. He isn't, they don't want to follow him, and I've heard, and I've been watching this. So we went without a first sergeant for about another month until he found one. But same thing, they'd be there about 2-3 weeks, and they go to some excuse to go, they were sick or something was wrong or something like that. They'd get a medical deal, and when they got there, why, they just never came back. It was really a rough deal. Some of us old timers, well, I wearing my front here to the last man. I was the last man in my company on the front line when we were still as an officer and non-commissioned officer.
What does that mean? You mean you had no men left in your troop?
No, original.
Original.
Original. Yeah, I was the last man when, and that's why I got the last man badge, because I was the last man in the company. And then my company went home, and I still kept me over there because I was working with the partisans picking up prisoners.
So you were picking up, German. What did they do with the German prisoners?
Oh, the Germans wanted to be captured by the United States, because if they were captured by England, they went over to England and worked down in the mines for about 2 years before they were released. And I was over there. I know what that was like. March them underground, and they'd be down there chipping away at coal or whatever they needed them for. And the United States sent them back to the United States and treated them like gold. They were treated a lot better than we were, you know, really. Yeah.
So when, I wanted to know a little bit more about when you went to Italy and how you actually really got involved with the underground. How did you, again, you were this person who stepped outside the box. You weren't the person who was there to be saluting every morning, or you were doing something different than other people were doing.
Well, this all started in Naples. That's the first big town we took.
Okay, so you were there with your
and
men coming in.
My platoon got our company and our regiment got credit for clearing Naples.
Okay. So the Germans had taken over before you got there?
Oh yes, they were running Naples. And so we got left there in AMGOT. In other words, we were left there to run Naples with, and then of course all the stuff from Washington and everything else. People that were trained in that work came in. Well, what I was doing, I was wandering around by myself. The guys were all down drinking beer or stuff like that. I didn't go over there for that. I was a married man. I went over there to get the war over with. That's my only thought, get the war over. And guy said to me one day, he said, Sergeant, he said, I got a good place. He said, well, you got to go and check. He said, he gives us free drinks and he speaks good American. I said, that sounds good. I said, well, let's go meet him. Well, he likes to meet guys like you. So we went and met him, and I felt I'd known him all my life. Just nice, common guy. Had a beautiful villa. And he had a guy bring us a drink and stuff like that. And I all at once realized, I said, this is too good to be true. They're after me for something. And he said, by the way, I got a couple people I want you to meet. And I said, okay. And so a couple came in next night. Next day we were up there. Had a few drinks, and her name was, I can't think of it now.
That's okay.
Anyway, I didn't know, but she was the head honcho of the Italian underground. And we took a liking to each other. And the other guy with her was her husband. We got along like two peas in a pod. And so she told me why she's in the underground. She watched Mussolini's group kill her father, her brother, shoot her mother, and she crawled up under a bed where she said nobody else could have got under there. She was 14 years old. And then they set the house on fire. But she said, I got out. And I'd made up my mind, I'm going to get those people for this, because I knew who they were. And she said, I've been doing it ever since. And she married this young kid she'd been going with in school. Brilliant woman. And I think I showed you the medal.
Yes.
That from her. Well, her name is on the back. And I bought that because the guy she married was a Japanese American from Los Angeles. And
So that was like her second marriage or something, or?
What?
Or was this woman is Italian, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And this is her second marriage.
Okay. What we were talking about is you met the woman who's the head of the underground
Yeah,
and her husband.
yeah,
And we were just talking before the recorder gave out about you had repurchased the medal, or purchased the medal that was in Los Angeles, I believe,
yeah,
that had been her medal
yeah,
and must have been sold by her second husband or
yeah.
something.
Well, she had died.
Okay.
That's what I found out. And her first husband was killed working on the underground. That's what happened to him.
Okay.
And she begged me to get a divorce, but I said, oh, my wife was too important for me. We had 53 years together. Anyway, I'm not one to run around on that stuff, you know. I go by the old Bible, Old Testament. You get married once and you're married for life. Anyway, yeah, I gave him pretty good money for that, and then he had to settle with this guy out there, but he was on drugs. I did talk to her husband, and you know, you could tell him he just you can tell him quick. You get him on a line, talk to him, because I did work for some law enforcement and drugs. Just volunteered. But then I said, it's getting too dangerous, so I'm going to give it up.
So anyway, you found out about this medal of hers.
Yeah.
Very unique medal.
Yeah, a guy down in Arizona knew I was looking for one. And because I thought maybe that Captain Kim, who died, he was a senator too, and he had one. And then the other guy lived right over here at Park Rapids. And I located his mother. And now I have located his only daughter, the only child that's living, and that's her daughter. And she's right north up by, right up by the Canadian line. And I'm kind of watching out for her and taking care of her. I took her down to, they named a hospital in his name, in the Third Army. And so I took her down there, and we spent a whole week, and I was her escort. And she took her son along. Let's see, the Masons spent over $1 million on him to put him together from an accident. An accident at school in hockey.
Oh my gosh.
Yep. See, the schools don't take care of them when they get hurt in this hockey stuff. And he got crippled for life. But they put him back, but he stutters a little bit. So I took him along, and I'm watching over both of them. He lives in Bemidji. So I keep my eyes on both of them if anything goes wrong.
That's nice. So you got this medal back then that was the Italian woman's
Yep.
medal. And so that's in your collection also.
Yeah, it's in the safe deposit box. The government said, please don't have that gold cross around. You're the only one we know that's still got one. Mm-hmm. The rest of them disappeared.
So anyway, here they were setting you up in Naples, meeting here the head of the underground and her husband, and plying you with drink, we might say.
Well, it turned into a very good friendship.
Right.
They were a nice couple, and I happened to have access to the kind of ammunition we needed, and that was gum nitro. Mm-hmm. Most people don't know how to handle it. It's the most powerful explosive you can get, and it's just like putty, like gum. You know, you've seen this stuff, kids work around their arms. Mm-hmm. Well, I could take a little tiny ball, about the size of a golf ball, and glue it up, and I could put a hole through this wall you could drive a 6x through. I don't care how thick it is. Mm-hmm.
So that's what they wanted your help with?
That's what I started out with them, because we blew up ammunition dumps. Well, we did a lot of funny things. Mm-hmm. And seems like we always come out just like the Lord was looking after us.
So tell me then, so your troops had come into Naples.
Yeah.
And had you driven the Germans out totally?
Oh yeah, they were all out. We cleaned them
They
all.
still were out in the countryside someplace.
Well,
in other
no, they'd
cities.
moved north, see, and set up another defensive line. And then they got bogged down, and then they pulled the 34th Division and us out, and we had to go again.
So that's what they were asking for munitions for and stuff.
And then
further
they
north.
always knew where to find me. I don't know why, but they'd find me. They were a slippery bunch. I've got pictures of them, some up here. You can see what they looked like. Before we hung Mussolini, you know, when he was laying on the ground. And now I did not see him shoot Mussolini or kill him. I'm not even going to know how they did it. I didn't want to know. Because my orders were to bring him back alive. And they said, Don, if you, well, I was by a different name with them. I was Noah. And she was Mary. We didn't use our own name. A lot of times we'd walk as husband and wife dressed in poor Italian clothing and go into towns where Germans were. And our contact in every town was a priest. That was our contact. And I've been over there now, 4 towns that I've got credit for eliminating big ones. And we put a plaque up in each one of those towns, and myself and the priest led the parade.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
So you were infiltrating, but you
All the
these
time.
towns
Yeah.
with your
And then Lance would
Feather
cover me.
costume.
Like they say, well, we know where there's a good ammunition dump. We know how to get it. They'd come in and
so
talk
that's
to
what
me.
you were looking for, to undermine them by blowing those up.
Yeah, and then I'd go down and get my contact at the ammunition dump, ours, and of course he was getting this to me without permission, but that's all right. We knew what we were doing.
Well, how did you carry this stuff? I mean, it's safe until when?
Oh yeah, it's gum, just like gum, just like putty, and you can carry it. And then I had caps, and caps would be taped around my leg because that's the only way you could, blow it up.
Okay.
And then I'd have maybe 5 feet of wire. We used the stuff you lit with a match because nowadays they do it with electric wiring. But we didn't have the batteries and stuff then. We lit it with a match. And you just take a little ball and roll it up, put a cap in the middle, and put a fuse on it. You see, your fuse, you go by minutes, half an inch for half a minute, on up or something like that. There's different fuses or different that you get so you know what you're using. And you light it, you know that you have to get away. And well, if ammunition dumps, you had to get far away because you could be blown. So we always put at least a 10 or 10 minutes, if possible, fuse on it. And then you sit back and pray. I hope that fuse gets to the ammunition after you got out of the sight. But sometimes we'd even get rolled on the ground with the after effects.
How many of these do you remember blowing up?
Oh, maybe 5. And I blew a lot of holes through walls. I did that with my platoon.
Was that by accident or
No, for
intentional?
purpose. We get in these towns and have hand-to-hand combat. It's no use going out the street when I can blow a hole in that wall, and we all rush through, and by the time the fog or the dust and everything is clear, we're out there battling.
So you were heading north out of Naples then.
Yeah.
Not only were you in the underground and you were blowing up the munitions dumps, but your troops were going out north
Yeah.
and continuing to try to...
No, I wasn't gone, nobody knew except Lance and I, our captain, what I was doing. And he was all for it.
So when did you even get a chance to sleep?
No, I never needed a lot of sleep. I don't know why. I've gone a lot of times 24, 48 hours without sleep. You just didn't think about it. I think you do it subconsciously.
Take cat naps, you mean, or something?
Yeah, when you're walking. Now, if you're making a long walk, I know guys fall asleep when they're walking. You just learned yourself to do that. We're just lucky we won that war, that's all.
Well, at what point then did the capture, what led up to the capture of Mussolini? What kind of incidents were happening at that time?
Well, see, I was in Rome, and I was in there 3 days before they jumped off from Casino. You know, from the, and my job was to protect Rome and help keep it an open city. We didn't want anything to happen to Rome due to the fact that, and I think the Germans felt the same way, but our own troops we had to watch out for, because we had these ships out in the ocean that were shelling. We had 155s. We had all these different guns, and I'd been up there in the front so long, I could tell you what kind of a gun fired that shot. And that's what my job was. And I had a direct telephone to Eisenhower and General Clark. And they were the two. Clark was the head of the Fifth Army, and Eisenhower. And it went to the Clark's headquarters. This was kept open all the time. So if a shell came in and it was getting pretty close to Rome, I'd tell them what kind of a shell it was, and they would know where to find that gun, you know, in there. And so I don't think we had more than one, and that had to be a mortar. And maybe some infantry dropped a mortar in there, but there was a mortar dropped in there. And boy, did I raise Cain on that. Because
that was your own people doing that.
That was the infantry coming up, and they should have known better. So then when we were, our troops were coming in, and we could hear the tanks rumbling coming up into Rome. To make us feel pretty good, made me feel pretty good, because I was in a very dangerous spot. I was on top of a building, and all at once, this building had a wall about that high, so we could crawl around up there without being seen. And then you'd peek over once in a while, and one of the Italians said, "Holler, this is Mussolini." And that's Mussolini. So I looked over, and he was loading up out of it. He was two buildings away from us. That's how close we were to his headquarters. And they all said they wanted to go over there. And he left Rome with his bodyguards and everything. And so I radioed in and I said, "I'm just watching Mussolini leave Rome." And it was, you could hear pin drop, that radio. And finally they said, "Your orders are to bring him back alive." Well, that's other words following. So I thought, well, I might as well go. All my troops are, all the partisans are already gone, just me and my radio man. I said, "Let's you and I sneak down. Let's get over there." So I got his clock from his desk. I still have it.
Wow.
That was my souvenir. And I know the radio man hooked up, And he said, you know, I can't, I've got to get back. I said, well, you're on your own. You can stop any one of these guys now and tell them you have to get back to headquarters. Because he was from Fifth Army headquarters. That's the one they had with me. And then I had 5 partisans and him and myself. And we sneaked through the line and we went about 14 miles, 15 miles at night, and we made it into Rome. Going through, we had Germans inside of 30 feet from us sometimes.
Were you just sneaking along? You didn't have your uniforms on, did you?
No, we were in. I left. We'd leave everything. The only thing I did do, which I wasn't allowed to do, I did put one of my dog tags in my shoe underneath the leather. Mm-hmm. So, 100 years from now, somebody might find it.
Yeah. So you had spotted Mussolini. So this was in a town outside of Rome.
Yeah.
Where you saw him packing up his stuff and leaving, or whatever.
No, it's in Rome.
Oh, this was in Rome.
He's right in Rome.
Oh, okay.
Yes, right in Rome.
Okay. And right in Rome, you saw him then.
Yeah.
But they told you to capture him alive, but you didn't really.
Well,
have
said
that
bring him. We want him alive,
yeah.
But partisan says no. You'll be hanging with him.
Oh, okay. So they're there with you, and they're going to capture him, and that's where you.
Well, they were going to.
You tell the story. What's happening next?
Yeah. They were going. He was going to die. That's it. And I bet he had a very, very bad death because they were all so mad at him. Like this gal, mm-hmm. You know, his troops or people killed her mother, mm-hmm. father, brother, and stuff like that. I mean, you can feel, you know, for yourself. You put yourself in their position, and then you know where their hate was.
Did they capture him that day then?
Yes. Well, no, next day.
The next day. Okay. So tell me, that's what was missing in the previous tape, the details around his capture.
and I was on foot, moving fast, mm-hmm. and quite a few partisans with me, because they had vehicles when they were following them. They had this stuff all planned out. Of course, they didn't tell me all their plans. Mm-hmm. But I'd go with them and work with them. That's about 90% of it. Yeah.
So this was happening. So the next day, and you knew where he went when he loaded up with his guards or whatever?
Well, when we caught up with him, they'd already moved him to where we hung him up from where they killed him. Mm-hmm. I don't know where they killed him, but they must have just thrown. There were 6, his guards and all, I think there were 6 of them hanging by their feet. Well, anyway, so I did follow, on foot. That's the only way I could go, but I could move pretty fast. That's one thing. I think I walked across Africa and Rome 2-3 times. And my feet are still good, and I've never had a corn, or I don't know what it's like. But they're almost lost my feet a couple times. And I'm having a battle with the VA right now because they won't give me any compensation for them. And my arms with all the wounds on them and everything, won't do a darn thing.
So you were there when they captured Mussolini, and I think in our previous interview you said that they hung him by his feet.
Yeah.
Okay.
They hadn't captured him yet. He was just leaving his headquarters.
Okay.
And they were just about 2 buildings down from us. But I did confiscate a lot of maps and passed them to a tank. Well, one of the tank guys come along, and I said, "Can I trust you?" And he said, "Yes." Why? I said, "Here's some maps I just stole out of, or just dug up out of Mussolini's, and it's too much for me to carry." Mm-hmm. And I just had them bundled up in my arms. And I said, "Protect them and give them to the 1st Infantry or your commander, and then he can pass them out." Mm-hmm. But I did get a pile of maps out of that building. Real happy about that. And then the clock I just stuck in my pack. But I was traveling light, see. I just had a light pack, a bunch of sea rations. Not C's, candy bars is what I took along. That you can survive on them for 3, 4 to 5 days, which I did many times. And they weren't heavy to carry. Well, they're compact, so. Oh, pardon me, I didn't mean to do that.
So he was escaping. You collected the maps.
Yep.
Got the clock, and you still have that today.
Yep, I got it someplace. I know it's buried someplace in my archives.
So, and it wasn't until the next day you stated, I think earlier, that they actually had captured him?
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me about that. And you were there, right, when that happened?
Oh, yeah. When they hung him up, people were going around spitting on him. Oh, you know, I could see their anger. I could feel their anger. But it's still, I thought, you know, this isn't human. This is my feeling of that time. You know, this isn't human. You got to treat humans at least humanly. And I got credit many times from the prisoners by following the Geneva Convention, where the English didn't, a lot of times they, instead of taking them back or worry about them, they'd just shoot them after they've been captured, and that was bad. And then we had a couple guys in the United States Army that were doing the same thing. They probably killed his brother or something, and they wanted to get revenge. But I believe in going by the laws of the land and laws that we make between enemy and you know, vice versa. And of course, it says in the Bible we'll always have wars. But now I'm finding out so much stuff right now that if the public knew what I knew right now, it would be amazing. Who is starting all of the wars and why and this and that. And I can't say anything here because I'm not going to bring myself in trouble.
Yeah.
No, I was just saying that your cane was sticking up into the picture, so you're okay now.
Oh yeah.
Okay, you're good.
So you saw Mussolini hung by his
Feet.
feet, and along with some other people. He had his mistress with him before.
Oh yeah.
At that time.
Yeah, her name is in there and everything.
Yeah, Clara something.
Yeah.
Or other.
Mm-hmm.
And then.
He had a wife too, you know, but I never did find out whatever happened to her. But I do know one thing, and I can mention is that Hitler had made a deal with Pope Pius. And I got this from the underground. And I said, how do you know? And they said, we know. Because he took a lot of their very valuable artwork and moved it to Germany and promised they'd get it back, promised the Pope they'd get it back. He said, I'm just going to protect it. Whether he was, you couldn't trust him at all. He was a madman.
So Hitler had taken the Italians' artwork.
A lot of them, yeah.
Just like he did with the Jews.
Yep. And of course, the Jews were at fault a lot too. I still wonder if they didn't get some of these wars started, but that's besides the point. I can't retaliate on any of that and have it published.
You had, and I think we'll wrap this up on maybe a little bit lighter note. You had talked about you had some funny stories.
Yeah, I do, and you know, I've been trying to think of them. This one guy down in Florida said, I'd been buried alive if you wouldn't have come along. And he said, all at once a strong arm reached down in this hole, and I was loaded with ammunition and brought me up and set me on my feet. And you said, just walk. And he said, I remembered your name. Or I remembered your, that's when you were first sergeant. He said, when I joined the outfit, you were first sergeant too. You made us all take that oath. And I said, well, maybe I was, but I said I was active, that's all. I said, I didn't care about rank. It didn't make a bit of difference to me. I was over there to get the war over with.
Mm-hmm. You had a goal.
I had a goal.
Very goal-driven.
Yeah, and I stuck by that goal. I didn't care whose feet I stepped on.
Yeah, and that's what we recognized about you, Don. You were a very unique individual. Very unique as far as, like I mentioned before, taking risks and doing things that other people wouldn't think of doing.
Well, you take a risk, yes, but I talk to, I believe in angels. Nobody can tell me there aren't any. Because I was brought out of stuff that I never could have been brought out of. Time after time, I know one time I got him in a basement of it. I think I put that on tape, though, before, of a big old barn, and all at once something told me, get him out of here now. And man, I come out of that. We hadn't had sleep for 3-4 days. And soaking wet. And we just dropped, just almost died right there. I got everybody out but 2 men. And they says, no, we're going to stay. You're not going to make us get out of here. And when I got out, a shell hit that building, and I must have been thrown 30 feet. Just right through the air. Mm-hmm. A great big shell. We called it Bazerta something. Cannon. It was mounted on the railroad.
So that is interesting that you should say that, and that you have the angel on your shoulder, guidance.
Yep.
That has somehow, this voice has been there to protect you in several situations.
Definitely. I wouldn't have been here. I often wondered why I was spared. Mm-hmm. When I think back, some nights I think, and you never get over it. All at once a name will come up, and it's, he was in the first squad or second squad. And you start thinking about him. And then you go back, and you go back, and you go back. I'm up in a chair maybe half the time instead of in bed. I get up and read a while to get my mind off of it so that I can, and then sometimes I fall asleep in the chair. But people just don't realize what wars are like, and I hate this. All I want to tell people that the infantry is good, but today it's 10 times better than when it was back there. Because, when you see bodies torn apart, pieces flying by you or hitting you, every time in there they said I wiggled a bath. Well, I didn't wiggle a bath. I was probably so banged up in my first aid man, and I would go to take a shower to get the wet clothes off of me. Couldn't even get them off. They were so bloody. Well, you didn't want newspaper people to come up and see you like that. They didn't want you to see them. Mm-hmm. And I can tell stories and I think of men right now that when they got blown up, I wonder if I hope they had enough to say, thank you, God, for taking me home, and hope you go home. Because it's so fast and so prompt. The shells you hear, don't worry about them. they've already did their doing their damage someplace. It's the ones you don't hear that get you. Same way in an airplane, you know that. Yep.
So, in closing off this interview, there are young men going to, and women going to Iraq right now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a war that's been going on since 2002.
Yep.
I want to say 2000.
2002.
If you had some bit of wisdom to share with them, or share your angel philosophy with them, what can you say right now?
Well, I've told quite a few of them. I said, "You're over to do a job, and do it good, but always have the Lord in your side. You've got to, nobody can tell me that there isn't one, because I'm sure I've met him." I've seen that hole they talk about twice and come back, because I'm not ready, or else somebody said you're not ready.
And it could be many, many different reasons, and part of it could be sharing your story.
And I feel that the Lord put me in this earth for some reason. You know, at 91, and I'm still going strong. I'm president of 34th Division, which I get out of now. It's September this year, but that's 34th Division. We have groups in Iowa, Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska. Got the 442, and most of them are in California. We got the ones in Hawaii, and they're just going to give the guys in Hawaii, I don't know why, they're giving them a bonus and don't give the rest of the 34th a bonus, but they are going to get a big bonus in Hawaii. Now maybe Hawaii government's starting that out. I just got word of it because I have to bring it up when I talk to the division, you know. And we had about 400 of us last year out of World War II is still there.
Oh, wow.
Had a few guys from Hawaii.
Well, there are a lot of World War II veterans that are being lost every day.
Oh, yeah. I think I was talking to Ripley the other day, and we're trying to keep track of them, and I can't even keep track of them anymore. They are running so many funerals in Minneapolis and in Ripley that they said, "Don, I hope we still got space for you because your wife's there." But if we don't, we're going to ship you anyway to Washington, D.C. So, well, I said, I just want to be out here in the no man's land. I love it here, right along the Mississippi River.
Well, I want to thank you so very much for coming in again and sharing even more detail about your